Your attention, please. Paul and Alex are required to proceed to the gate immediately.
What?
No way.
What is happening here?
This is the last call for the Layovers podcast.
Really?
Come on, man. This is our thing. We got this.
Oh, yeah.
And we made it.
Of course, geeks.
Flight 78 to Melbourne.
Oh, finally. We don't often stray south of the equator, do we? We need to fix that.
Yes, exactly.
We are fixing it. We're fixing it right now.
We've done South Africa, and I think we've done Brazil, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
We're not very good at this, right?
No, we need to fix that.
And we have a lot of listeners in Australia, so finally, guys, we're getting to you. We actually had a tweet, I think, a month ago or 2 months ago about someone says, hey, you never talk about Australia. You never actually covered an airport. So here you go. I've done it. I was in Australia. I was in Melbourne for literally 3 days. So you basically fly the whole time.
I was going to say, that's a long way to go for just 3 days.
I found a super deal with Etihad. I'll explain that a bit later. So the flight itself is also cool. I'm going to say that right away. I'm not going to explain all the thing about the flights because otherwise this episode will last for 5 hours because I've done also flights with SAS and BA. That will be for the next episodes. Today I'll concentrate on Etihad and Melbourne. And you know what? I have proof that we have a lot of listeners. There's not only because of our stats, but because I've gotten so many Twitter replies and DMs and Instagram messages and etc. You're here. This is so cool. I'm like, oh wow. And they were like super helpful. They gave me tips what to do in Melbourne. Hadn't been there for 25 years actually. Really, guys, I'm going to mention a few during the show. And really, I know we've been saying that for the past 20 episodes probably, but I think we're reaching the breaking point where we have way too many mentions and people talking to us compared to our ability to track it and simply the time we have in an episode. So please forgive us once and for all if we don't mention you, if you tweet back at us, or if sometimes we don't reply, because honestly, guys, we don't have the time.
No, but it's still very much appreciated.
Oh yeah, we love it. And we'll keep trying to mention you because you've been super helpful. I also had someone when I was in Stockholm, Arlanda, which is where I started flying with that Etihad deal. I had also a Stockholm listener, I think I have his names later on in the show as well, who said, hey, you're here. What do you think about the airports? That's pretty cool, actually.
That's very cool.
So thank you. You're back in England?
I am back in England. Yep. It's this is the first time we've recorded since I got back. Yeah, I'm here. I'm back. At least for a couple of days.
Yeah, because you guys all realize, but we haven't talked to each other since we last recorded and since the episode was, released, I think almost a week after. It's been 3 weeks or something. We, of course, we chat over Messenger all the time about airplane news, but so for us, it's a reunion.
Yeah.
on a good time zone as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a much more civilized time of day.
you already had your coffee. Let's start this. How was your flight back? Did you have to suffer through Heathrow immigration?
Yeah, fine. It was a BA Dreamliner out of San Jose, although we sat on the ground for a while after we'd all boarded, and that process was fine and very easy. And we sat there, and the first officer came on and said, yeah, we've got a little bit of a problem with the battery. And I was like, I was the only person who sort of went, okay, that's not good. That's not good at all. Because those batteries are important. He didn't say that at the time, but he did a bit later. And also, Dreamliner and battery and problem are not something you want to hear in a single sentence.
Yeah, wasn't that the Ethiopian flight that caught fire?
Yeah, there have been a few. I think there was an ANA one that had a problem. Not as catastrophic as that.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It took a while. Basically, they couldn't get the battery to come online, so to say yes, it's charged and it's there and ready should they need it. It took about an hour and a half to fix the problem, and I was listening to air traffic control and they were keeping them up to date, but they said we can't fly over the Atlantic without this working. I had messaged my in-laws who dropped us off to say there's a small chance we're going to be coming back tonight because this is not an insignificant problem, but yeah, they managed to fix the problem. We were on our way. The flight was smooth and easy. And for those of you that travel with kids, I tried a new strategy because my eldest son, who's just about to turn 8, we give him the iPad on the airplane. They're both amazing travelers. but he'll sit there and he'll play the iPad and he won't sleep, and which is a problem, obviously. So I said, all right, guys, no iPad until after you sleep. You can watch movies on the TV in front of you or whatever. And they're like, oh, they got half an hour into Jurassic Park, fell asleep, slept the whole way.
No, that's like, awesome.
Yes, jackpot.
And you play with the iPad.
Yeah, exactly. I get to play with the iPad. No, I got some much needed rest as well. But I was bracing myself for hours and hours of immigration queues because of all the stuff that's happened over the summer. And we've talked about this, that I can't use the e-gates because children under, I think, 16 can't use them. And the last few times we've gone through at Heathrow and Gatwick, the queues have been huge. I said to my wife, let's get snacks ready. Let's make sure that they've got something to do. We get there, and there was literally nobody in the queue.
Wow,
not a soul. Cool. The non-EU passport queue was average at best, or worst, depending on how you look at it. I was pleasantly and delightedly shocked. There was, without exaggeration, not a single person ahead of us. And we went straight through. Our bags and my bike and all that stuff. Easy. It was good. I don't know what they did or how they cleaned out the queue, or if we were just lucky with our arrival time, but there we are.
Lucky you, yeah. We suffer through that every summer. Of course, there's a border patrol, border control, whatever the name is, border force shortage probably. But
yeah,
because maybe you were at the tail end of what are the holidays here in the UK, there was just less people maybe, and the issue resolved itself, and it will happen again on the next holiday or something.
I think very possibly, and I think we had to wait until pretty much everybody was off the plane because they bring the buggy up to the top of the stairs on the jet bridge. So we had to wait for pretty much everybody to get off the airplane. I can't imagine that, in theory, should make it worse because everybody's ahead of us in the queue, but
yeah,
it just didn't seem to be that case.
Well, then, good. Well, they just knew that Alex was coming back.
Yeah, they cleared the decks, as they should.
Because, they're all listening to this podcast, and once we criticize something, they had to fix it for us. By the way, you listen to Alex later because, of course, we mentioned about, startups doing, flights that makes no sense, that are only for rich people, and Alex got invited to do one. No, not exactly. I'm kidding, but... He would love to tell us. I don't know anything. He hasn't told me a lot about it. He flew something. We'll talk a bit later in the episode. And I'm jealous, to be frankly honest with you. I'm jealous.
It was. I'm looking forward to telling the story because it was a neat little thing.
One piece of news that it's not news, but it's not fun. I'll start with that because I think we need to acknowledge this date of September 2, 1998. I remember my father woke me up. It was an early morning. I was still living in Geneva. And I was working at a startup, and my father says, well, there's a crash. And the first thought I had in my mind was like, oh, shit, the market crashed, and, my startup will be gone and over.
Yeah.
Well, that was not to happen before 3 years, but that was the Swissair 111 that had crashed. It's one of the biggest disasters in history. It is also a specific type of crash because it's one of the rare occurrences where the plane was still basically at full speed when it crashed over the water near Nova Scotia in Canada. There was, I think, 229 people passed away. So that's 20 years ago. This flight was very well known, especially if you live in either New York or in Geneva, because it was the UN shuttle, United Nations. They both have headquarters, and the flight actually had, Picassos and UN scientists and very famous people in there. There was even before Federer, we had another tennis player in Switzerland that had just lost the US Open and actually decided not to take that flight. And for a while, he didn't fly anymore because obviously...
Yeah, that kind of thing will screw you up.
Yeah, and the industry learned a lot. It was a wiring of the IFE that actually created a fire above the flight deck. And I'm sorry to go in gruesome details to the point that we think it's never been fully established because people literally exploded in a million pieces where they hit. So we were never able to recover bodies, only like pieces. But that probably even the two pilots actually caught fire. So that's the extent of that crash. It's really not fun to talk about. And the one thing I'm going to encourage people to do, because it's probably one of my favorite ever piece of writing, is to read The Long Fall of 111 Heavy, which is a piece that was written for Esquire in 2000. It's available online since for 10 years or something. And it's one of, for me, the best pieces about aviation, in that grief part of aviation is more than grief. It's actually what is the experience of loss, of disintegration of families, of what is memory, how do we cope. It's more poetry than prose, I would say, because even some people say that a few of the facts in there are not completely accurate, but that's not the point. You experience what it means to have a crash, what it means for the families, for the medical examiners, for the people that were involved in all that happened just right after. And it's really not even about aviation tragedy, but it's really one of the best pieces ever for me about tragedy. It's of course moving. But for me, it's brutal, essential. It's a magistral piece. The long fall of 111 Heavy. It's a tough piece, guys, right? I mean, it takes
anything
you 20
about
minutes.
That is going to be not very easy to read.
How do you tell grieving family members the average body is now in 100 pieces, 100 little stars? It's literally tough, but I think if you like aviation, and I know this is a dark side that, thank God, doesn't happen almost not anymore, I think you ought to read it. There's actually one piece that was one trivia almost that is quite fascinating. There was one dad that had lost his daughter in the flight, actually went there and felt at peace being in Nova Scotia next to the crash site, and bought a very, that place, that village is maybe 60 people, but bought a restaurant there to be close to the waves where he felt the presence of his daughter. He bought a restaurant. He sold it after he stayed for 10 years, but still, that's the kind of experience of grief, of loss that is. It's really something, guys, that I encourage you to read. It paints ghosts, and it's a very powerful piece. And I sorry to be a bit a downer here, but I think you have, guys, to read it.
No, you're right. I think it's a wonderful piece, and as you say, we learned so much from that tragedy, and I think that's, if you can take any positivity or silver lining from events like that, that's one thing the aviation industry at large is very good at. Is understanding and learning from these tragedies, and how airplanes are wired now, be it for IFE or in any other way, was completely changed after that across the board. And but it is I agree, it's a stunning piece.
And if any one of you has ever experienced any type of grief, and that grief can be very schizophrenic, and that's actually the term that the author uses, it's actually very powerful. Do you remember the last time you felt the wind touched your lips to the head of your child? Can you remember the words she said as she last went, ticket in hand? Very powerful, guys.
Yeah.
So moving from that to a completely non-powerful thing, Vanilla Ice. Ice, baby.
This was just extraordinary.
So what happened exactly? So he was in these Emirates flights. We're recording today, Thursday, the 6th of September. So that was yesterday. He was in that Emirates flights from Dubai to New York, JFK, and that flight lands, and he's quarantined because apparently there's, depending on who you believe, 10 to 100 people that fell violently sick during the flight.
Yeah. I heard about this, as I seem to about most things aviation these days, from Jason Rabinowitz at Airline Flyer. And I think he was just retweeting things that were coming across his news feed. I think that what the story that he retweeted was quoting this 100 number, that an Emirates plane had been quarantined, hundreds people sick. And my first reaction was just, I think, the same as everybody else's, was food poisoning.
Yeah.
This scale sounds about right. 100 people in economy eating one of maybe 3 options that were available, all ate something.
They didn't have the lasagna.
They didn't have yeah, exactly. Some of the memes and quotes that were going around were great, but the facts eventually materialized, and it was more like 10 people who had fevers and coughs, so not necessarily food related.
Yeah, because coughs usually when you have food poisoning, and I hope that you guys never had like a violent one, but you get, a lot of symptoms, but coughs is not the one usually linked to it. The full picture is not there because it just happened yesterday. The strong rumors are that there were people that were already sick from a type of influenza, so flu, that boarded And, well, you know, you're like, whatever, it's like 15 hours in the same flight, and maybe the virus was active. And I mean, we'll know, obviously. At the end of the day, I think they only sent 10 people to the hospital. 8 were treated directly at the airport, and everybody else was let go. It doesn't mean that of that everybody else, they're all good. Maybe some are like very tame symptoms, but it doesn't seem to be like, you know, the hysteria that people like, oh, the entire flight is about to die and there's zombies in the Emirates flights or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's kind of, people were saying like the footage from one of the local news stations was like what you see playing in the background of some zombie movie at the beginning. But it was, yeah, I think the CDC was there, and everybody on the plane had to fill out a form with basic information about their health, and they were taking the temperatures of people, as you say, as they left the airplane. And wasn't there some, again, so much of this is third hand account, but wasn't there something where the airline and whoever else was in charge, maybe the Port Authority, said, yes, you can deplane, but then the CDC delayed them at immigration, or maybe the immigration services said, actually, maybe not.
Yeah, I think so they forced people to deplane with the stairs. They put them in buses, and when the bus arrived in front of the terminal, they had to stay in the buses because then there was like a big bit of a ruckus. Should we actually allow them in? Of course, there was terrorist concerns, but also like they wanted to make sure everything was fine. I think, you know what? I think for once they must have regretted not having these machines that if any one of you guys flies in Asia, we have at every airport where they detect your temperature automatically, which both Alex and I are always like a bit, we know we're not sick, but when you see these machines, you're like,
am I sick?
My throat is not clear. I'm sure actually I have some kind of fever.
Yeah.
You're like,
yeah, exactly. You just panic.
Yeah, so I mean, an airplane is a confined environment for so many hours. It could be many things. And even if it's food, I don't think, you know, I'm sorry to put it that way, but shit happens. I mean, nobody died. I'm not saying here to completely say that the Emirates is not at fault. Maybe they're not, by the way, but just to say that sadly, once in 100,000 time, there might be an issue and it will happen. I mean, all airlines do their best to cover every type of angle about health and safety in planes. Maybe some people say, oh, should the airline not have been allowed to embark those supposedly ill passengers that were coming, I think, from Saudi Arabia? I don't know. Maybe if they had those machines detecting the temperature, maybe they wouldn't have. But I mean, it's a case that is so rare that I'm not sure we're going to have to revamp all the regulations about airlines.
No, I think it was just one of those things that was
exactly.
Perhaps, in a way, it was probably a good test of the processes in place to deal with something like this.
Oh, yeah.
That did have 100 people ill. But I think the most important detail that we haven't mentioned is how you opened this segment. Ice Baby.
Oh, yeah.
Vanilla Ice himself was live tweeting the whole thing from inside the airplane.
You sent me that. I was like, what? So, because, there was a lot of other people. Obviously, it was on the ground. They had like network, but he was there. He was, I think, on the upper deck, if I'm not mistaken. So he was probably in business class, right? But it is. So that probably also augmented the number of people getting the story. So now the big one is, if and ever we learn that the cause of all this is actually vanilla ice cream at Emirates, then, that will be awesome.
Yeah.
Another event that happened just also yesterday, for the first time in its history, Japan had, I think it's the first time, Japan had 2 airports that were closed at the same time for 2 different catastrophes events. There was KIX, Kansai, which we covered a while ago, which was completely flooded due to the typhoon called JB, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
The images were absolutely insane.
Yeah, they were. I mean, I was talking to my wife about this morning. The whole runway, taxi area, basically the entire ramp was underwater.
It's crazy, yeah.
And they like underwater, like not like it was a bit wet. It was flooded. As you see, the pictures were spectacular. And then, because Japan, they said flights resume tomorrow.
Exactly, that's crazy.
How? They're the only country in the world.
The one reason that it was flooded, obviously, is that it's a man-made island. So, of course, the clearance of the water is not that high. So, clearly, if there is a flooding, it gets hit pretty quickly. I'm wondering, though, it wasn't not long, the flooding, and it didn't last for days because, like you just said, it's just ripping. But I'm wondering if there's any effect of, planes parked there. A lot of them had gone, but there was a few parked there, and having water, I guess it will have to get some checks or something. I'm not sure, but
yeah, I think there was maybe 5 or 6 ANA and Peach planes there.
yeah.
But I don't know. One would assume that they would have moved them if they thought they would be damaged. They were on the inside bit of the airport, so as far away from any kind of coast that you could get. And when you saw the pictures, they did appear to be dry, but did they get bashed around in the rain and the wind?
The wind was insane.
It was incredible.
To the point that a big boat, is not a tanker, but it's got a very big boat, hit the bridge, which is the bridge that links that man-made island to the mainland, and hit the bridge pretty hard because you can see that one of the lanes is actually completely destroyed.
Yeah.
It's, Japan cannot get a break because that's the second airport that was closed just a few hours later. There was an earthquake in Hokkaido.
Yeah.
It's Sapporo, New Chitose Airport, which you'll probably...
I'm going to, in 2 months.
You'll discover soon. It's a nice... There's an onsen in the airport, man.
Of course there is.
We'll talk about it when you get there. I'll give you some tips before you get there because it's a fun airport. There was sadly some people passing from the typhoon. I don't think from the earthquake.
No, unfortunately there have been some deaths in the earthquake.
That's the sad news from Japan. But like you say, the always impressive thing about Japan is like it seems like 24 hours later,
they'll bounce back. It's extraordinary. I don't know how they do it, but I admire them
infinitely for that. It's just fantastic. A few people, more than a few people, as I said in the beginning, have sent us like a lot of tweets and messages. I'm not going to cover everything. We had Doug S. Shocker. I hope I pronounced your Twitter handle correctly. Hey guys, great podcast. I discovered you a few months back and I'm listening from both ends. So he listens to new shows when they come. And when he doesn't have that, he goes back listening from our first episode.
Wow.
You actually answered stuff from very old episodes. I'm going to very quickly mention it. You said that in episode 17, I don't even remember episode 17, we talked about Memphis. There is a business lounge by Delta, which is a holdover from where they took over from Northwest. So if you actually are flying through Memphis, there is a lounge. I remember saying that, I wasn't sure. Or maybe you said that. Honolulu, so that's much more recent. That's episode 77. He says he's a military pilot.
Oh, wow.
We do not have actually a restriction on special mugs to use for drinks. We just have a regulation that states no open drinks will be passed across the console.
That
there
makes
you go.
sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, actually. And he sent me a piece of news that is old, that a spillage had happened in commercial flights as well. I think that dates back from 2011. So it has happened that there has been a spillage that forced rerouting of a flight as well.
It's one of those things where you probably had to make the mistake before everyone's like, yeah, we shouldn't pass these containers across the console. That's really important.
Yes. Bryson Kotakam, again, hoping that I pronounce all your names correctly, at MTN_D3W_addict with a 1 instead of the I. He sent us, first of all, the best ever, picture-in-picture thing that we've been asking our listeners to do, because he was fueling a plane at Honolulu Airport, and he has his phone laying on the fuel pipe that is fueling what is probably, I don't know, maybe a 737.
Oh, yeah.
That's actually very, very cool, Bryson. We really appreciate that. That's probably the best picture we ever gotten about someone listening to our show. And thank you for actually doing that kind of work. You are making sure that we can actually fly. I think it's a Hawaiian aircraft in the background. It's blurry, but I'm pretty sure I recognize the tail.
Yeah.
And he adds that we're not wrong. There are no good food options at Honolulu Airport.
It's funny, isn't it? There's such opportunity there. But what I found in the U.S. is that the airport experience, at least in terms of the F&B and retail, it's all the same in all the airports.
Yeah, sameness. It's always the same outlets. I mean, we had a discussion. We won't have we won't cover that today, but it happens in a lot of airports when you have the Starbucks, the same brands over and over and over again, which is why also sometimes we do like airports in Asia, because you see at least stuff that you're not used to. Yeah. And not to mention, obviously, an airport like, I don't know, Haneda, when you have this entire fake village of Edo Village, when you'll have sushis and stuff that you wish other airports would do more effort to basically push their own cuisine. Maybe, for instance, we would talk about food. Though Paris, I was at Charles de Gaulle. Why? I did both Charles de Gaulle and Frankfurt lately. Again, though, I keep criticizing them. They have like stuff like, I think, Fauchon, which is also a French, kind of higher end type of French food. So they are a good option, but it's true that it seems sometimes that you always see the same stuff over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's frustrating, and it feels like a missed opportunity.
Yeah. He says, though, Bryson adds that they are great food trucks just outside for the employees.
Well, there you go. I wonder, can you get to them as a passenger?
Yeah, Bryson, that's exactly what we want to know. Jeremy Roberts at Judge_Smails99. He says he's a U.S. travel agent, an aviation geek, and he capitalizes the love, our show. He has pre-check and clear, and he says it's absolutely worth it because with both, you can bypass the TSA line and you can get through security in less than 5 minutes most of the time. So it's super effective. LA Flyer, also very long-time listener, says that the benefits of Clear is that once you're processed, you're escorted in front of the TSA pre-check line. See, so you actually are bypassing a lot of the pre-check as well. Is it worth 180 quid or 179 quid a year? I guess it really depends how much you're flying, which is what Alex Ostreicher at Value Deck says. He says, you would never use Clear because, TSA Pre was $80 for 5 years. And for that, you reach almost like 900 for 5 years with Clear. So I guess, again, it really depends. If you fly all the time, maybe it's worth it. If you don't, well, it's clearly not.
Yeah. And what's up, Striker? How are you? That's, I think, absolutely right. And I've seen it's getting to the point where, and we saw this in San Jose when we flew back, that you have like 4 different queues or 5 different queues.
Wow.
You've got Clear, you've got TSA Pre, regular people, and staff, and maybe priority. Yeah, priority and then staff. So you're kind of like, but actually you just reminded me of another interesting thing that happened. Because BA now have TSA Pre, I had it on my boarding pass for going through San Jose, as did my entire family. So we were all, even the kids, were able to go through the TSA pre-line.
That's cool.
I can't even tell you how much of a difference it made. Not having to take the iPads out and the kids take their shoes off and me trying to hold the baby while I'm taking my shoes and my belt off and getting my laptop out and the liquids out. So much easier. So much easier.
Yeah, I should definitely actually think about doing that. Your brother actually had the best comment about all this pre-thing. He says, I'm so British that the Clear escort service, is that really the name of escort service? Because it's really not very... makes me very uncomfortable. I'd much rather have my own queue than be perceived as a queue jumper. Yeah, that's very British.
Yeah, that is very British.
A few other reviews and comments. Again, LA Flyer. Got to say one of my pleasures is listening to Layovers podcast while out traveling the world. True mix of my travel, reality, and your experiences. Good night from Malaysia. Thank you so much. That's really cool. iTunes, 5 stars. Love it. From Robbie Gitonga, I guess, from Kenya. So, look, we need to do more African stories because he actually says that. He says, glad to have stumbled upon this podcast. Really enjoy the discussions as an AV geek from Nairobi, Kenya. Looking forward to hearing more African aviation news, however.
Yeah, we need to focus on that.
We know. Where it's really a territory we don't go often to, so, but we will. We will probably actually have to invite, maybe you, Robbie, could actually be our guest and talk about, your flying experiences in Africa, because I think we will need to build a lot of experience, Alex and myself, before we get to a point where we can actually judge that continent in terms of aviation.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Another 5-star from PJoe1234 in the UK. What a find for an aviation nut like me. Lots of great content from experienced travel experts. Thank you. I don't know if we're experts, but thank you so much.
Enthusiasts is probably the more accurate.
I love that. Again, at Value Deck, he actually sent us also a shot from his phone above the wing. And I seem to be recognizing a 767 window, but I'm not sure. No, it must be, no, it cannot be because it's a Southwest. He says, not a great shot, but I enjoyed your show while taxiing at Southwest this evening. No, so it's not a 767. If it's Southwest, it's a 737 for sure. Taylor Moore, I think that's for you, Alex, sent us this morning a shot of his Apple Watch in front of the Alaska magazine Beyond.
Shots fired.
And we have Pimp My Diber.
Pimp My Diber, that's Ben. Ben, who's a Mastication Nation listener and a Layovers listener as well.
Oh, well, there you go. Thank you for providing me context, Alex. He sent us a picture of his 7-year-old son, Sam, listening to Layovers just before departing to Lisbon.
Hey, Sam, how's it going?
Yeah, hi, Sam.
Sorry for the language.
I was about exactly to say the same thing. And I kept the best for last. Craig, our favorite brewer. It's not an airplane, but does a brew house count? And he sent us a picture of his phone playing our Seattle episode in front of his brewery, of actually what seems to be like the concoction before becoming a beer. So thank you so much.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Actually, I love that. And yeah, one more because I really loved it. It's related to Seattle, our episode Seattle. Bipolar Beer at Glebaz replied something really awesome. He says, I just hope Microsoft doesn't acquire SeaTac Link Rail and rebrand it as Skype for Trains. I love that joke. Skype for Trains. Yes, true. What else? Oh, yeah. Alex, we have to be careful when we talk about the Trent, because now we have Oliver Walker-Jones, who is the head of communications from Rolls-Royce. He's actually listening to us. That's what I think.
It's a pleasure and an honor to have you listening.
Yes. So forgive us if sometimes we're making bad jokes about a Trent 1000. Look, Alex flew it twice to go to the US and back. I flew it to go to Australia and back, and it held very, very well. So see, it actually is a great engine.
Yeah.
And to link to my flight, we had Alex, because that hits home for us. We had Peter Evans at Evans PW. To be honest, I find it much more interesting when you guys talk about your experiences flying economy coach or pleb.
Pleb. Yeah, I mean that's a fair.
Yeah, it's a fair criticism. To be honest, it's a bit hard sometimes for us. When I say hard, no, it's not. It's actually the opposite of hard, of course, flying in the front of the cabin. But when you have clients providing you with a budget to fly in front of the cabin, we're most likely not going to force ourselves being in the back of the cabin. It's a catch-22. I fully agree that our experiences are very not as relatable. I know that some of our listeners love listening about what is in front of the cabin, but it's true that we should sometimes pay more attention to that. So Peter, I'm not going to promise that we're going to only fly economy from now on, but we will pay attention to that because we don't want to feel like privileged pricks in front of the cabin.
I have a few economy long-haul flights coming up, so I will let you know.
Is it only BA?
No. None of them are on BA.
Oh, wow.
There's Air Canada. And then
you're flying Air Canada?
I'm flying Air Canada to Vancouver on Sunday in economy. So I have absolutely no idea what to expect. I've never flown on Air Canada.
Wow, that's really cool.
Out of T2 in Heathrow. And then I'm flying to Chicago on American in economy.
I remember, yeah.
So I'll report back. I have some interesting travels coming up on the back of those other trips, so we'll save those for future episodes. Though.
Yeah, yes, you do have. So as I said in the beginning of the episode, I'm only going to talk about my Etihad experience from now, not the rest, because the SAS bit was also very interesting, and Stockholm Arlanda as well, but I keep that for other episodes. So yeah, Etihad, it's the first ME3 I haven't flown. I've flown them in 2009. It was a 777 300ER. I think I've flown from Manila to Doha back then. And then I think at 320, I think I flew to Europe or something. And it was, my first taste of ME3 and I liked it. I've flown not a lot with them since then. I had flown, you remember when I told you guys I flew to Kazakhstan from Manchester, and I did actually the first class and also a triple. Was it a 777? Yeah, I think it was a 777. So this time I found this great deal. I had a budget again from a client to go to do something in Melbourne And I was like, okay, I'm going to go in economy because the budget is quite low. I mean, low relatively, but it's expensive to go to Australia. So I was looking at a Cathay at Singapore. I was looking at Emirates, obviously. I mean, I was looking at all the different... and then I found this deal leaving from Stockholm with Etihad that was below my budget, just below the budget I was assigned to. So it was really a very good deal, and I would be able to fly in business class. I said, you know what, the hell with it. Of course, I'm going to go to reposition myself to Arlanda. So I flew first 330, and it's the same seats as you find on Iberia, for instance, the 340. They are staggered seats, it's 1-2-1. But it's a bit like most of the people do. You have one seat which is a true window and the other seat that is a fake window because you have the console between you and the window. Very nice flight. What I really enjoyed on that specific flight is, besides the food that was quite good, is the amenity kits. You have very cool amenity kits on Etihad. They have... I didn't mention last time when I was talking about Air France. Air France gives you like these very colorful amenity kits. The box is really super fun. With Air France, you can even choose a color. So I was not able to choose the color at Etihad, but because I've done all these legs, they have multiple colors, and they're very, you see how the tail, Alex, is of Etihad, right? With these strange mosaic.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's exactly the design of the amenity kits. It's really, really nice. And they have a partnership with Lux. These little travel guides, these leaflets.
Yeah.
So in each of these, you receive a different Lux. So the one when I was going to Abu Dhabi was the one about Abu Dhabi. I find it a pretty cool gesture, actually.
Yeah, I do too.
It's very hip. The contents were done by a company called Scaramouche and Fandango.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, it's really, really, really nice. It's so you can see there's a lot of attention to details, and because we always compare Etihad obviously with Emirates when we talk, and most people do, the entire color of the cabin is more subdued. I prefer it, to be frank, over Emirates, because Emirates, they have these too much gold sometimes, and fake wood. Also, these amenity kits felt more modern overall, so more fun. Although, and it's a bit almost sad, I've learned, thanks to the pursuer in the flight, that they are going to switch to a more traditional, let's go to, Aqua di Parma, I don't know if you guys know it, which is more upscale type, less hip, less fun. And they're gonna introduce those on 380s and 777s from now on, especially so if you fly to London, etc., you'll get those. And he adds, I'm on the flight from Frankfurt to Abu Dhabi, and he adds, you would have the Aqua di Parma if you were flying to Sydney. And I found it interesting that he knew that I was flying to Melbourne and was able, in the conversation without anything in front of him, being able to simply converse, and then even talked about Melbourne with me. I found that it's a very good quality of training to being able to discuss with me that. So I will say the experience with that flight, out of 10, it was a 9. It's really, really, really solid. I didn't eat too much because I was, the second flight from Abu Dhabi to Melbourne is about 15 hours. So I was like, I don't want to overeat in the first flight because then what else? What I'm going to do in the second one? I'm going to sleep a little and I'm going to eat. So I'm like, I paced myself, but really, really, really good. Great crew, great product. To the point that, I'm a bit sad that Etihad seems to be falling like that, because we keep saying that they lost money, they're reducing the fleets, etc., because it's really, really a great product. The one thing very interesting is that I didn't realize is that they seem to be very well integrated with Star Alliance, to the point that some people think that they might actually join the alliance at some point. That's a strong rumor, because in Frankfurt, they are in the same terminal as Lufthansa, not as most of the other airlines in the other terminal, which is the non-Lufthansa terminal. That's interesting.
That is interesting.
Which also led me to the experience of the dread of Frankfurt. Will I have to go past security? And I sent you the picture from that dreaded tunnel that leads from BA to Z, right?
Yeah.
But for some reason, that's where, again, we don't understand that layout. This time, no security. So I was like, why? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know why there's security or no security. It's not consistent with, I didn't have to enter Schengen like last time, for instance. So, it actually makes sense.
Yeah, it's frustrating, the whole inconsistency, I suppose it is.
I was able, that's another point about this closeness with Lufthansa, which is funny because when Lufthansa talks about the ME3, they keep like criticizing the ME3, but they seem to be very close to Etihad, is that you are actually using the Lufthansa lounges as well. So I was able to use a Senator lounge from Lufthansa whilst waiting for my flight with Etihad. So it's interesting to see that closeness, which I had no idea about before actually flying them. Then I land to Abu Dhabi, AUH, and that's a bit the issue of Abu Dhabi is, like I mentioned earlier, that I flew there my first time in 2009, and it hasn't changed really. They keep pushing back the opening of that new terminal, the Midfield terminal they call it, which is this grandiose, massive 80 million passenger thing which sits in the middle of the airport. You can see it because it looks really magnificent. Now they promise it's going to be open by the end of next year because really Abu Dhabi is, compared to all the other airports in the region, seems cramped. Seems not a airport for hub and spoke model at all.
Yeah.
And the lounge, it's perfectly fine, the business lounge, but it's, again, the exact same lounge I was in 2009. I'm not saying that lounges should be upgraded every 5 months. I'm just saying that it seems that the delay of this Midfield terminal has made also suffered a bit the product. It's more than okay, but it feels like you're an airport from the 90s, not from 2018 overall, right? Have you ever been?
Yes, I have once.
A long time ago?
Yeah, I can't even remember what it was like. That's the problem. They start to blend into each other.
Yeah, because there's nothing actually spectacular about it. The only spectacular thing which I always loved about that airport is the tower. The tower has been designed, it's like it sits pretty far from the terminal where you're in, and it feels like it's been designed like in the shape of a sail to reflect the story of Abu Dhabi of seafaring. And it's, to me, the most beautiful tower that I've ever seen. In the fact that it's a bit remote from the terminal, and with that haziness that the sand creates when it's very hot as well in this region, makes it feel almost like a ghostly presence a bit in the background. I'll send you a picture, Alex. It's absolutely fantastic. And I've learned through LA Flyer, again, on Twitter, that the new Istanbul Tower could also be a very beautiful one because it's supposed to represent a tulip. If you guys look it up online, there's like drawings and design of that new Istanbul Tower, and it looks pretty cool. But really, for me, that tower from Abu Dhabi is a redeemed quality of that airport. I cannot wait for the new terminal to open.
Yeah, the renderings are all spectacular. The tower is spectacular.
It's just that it took so forever. And also, since I'm there, so they have a new CEO for the airport. They have had a new CEO for Etihad for a little bit now, I think, as well. Etihad has basically said that they are abandoning the hub and spoke model, becoming more of a destination model, which is going to Abu Dhabi. But then I understand the predicament, because why would you have an 80 million passenger terminal right in the middle of a destination city? I mean, I love Abu Dhabi. I actually realized this time that I love it more than I thought, because it's not a city I know as well as Dubai. But you don't have 80 million people going to Abu Dhabi, right? I'm not sure about the future of Etihad as a whole if it's not the hub and spoke model, because I'm sure, and there are, Abu Dhabi, for those who don't know, is the richest of the cities in the Emirates. So they're richer than Dubai. The power is there. If you want, the governmental power is also sits there because they have access to most of the oil money, etc., etc., etc. But is that a destination that requires an entire fleet of hundreds of aircraft?
Well, yeah, exactly.
So to be frank, I don't know. Anyway, so let's cut my trip in two. I'm going to go to the one to Melbourne in a bit, but since I'm in Abu Dhabi, I'm going to leave you now going back to the US. I want to hear about your experience, that experience of a charter flight. What happened? Why did you get it? Why did you make me jealous?
Yeah, yeah. That was the real reason I did it. Was to make you jealous. So I got a message from a friend of mine who works at JetBlue, who I've known for years. We were at Virgin America together, and he said, "Hey, have you ever flown on JetSuiteX?" And I was like, "No, I haven't. I didn't even know what they were."
Yeah, what is JetSuiteX?
And the only reason why I knew JetSuite was because I'd seen them advertised on the JetBlue IFE, and it turns out they've got some kind of a strategic relationship with them. But JetSuite is a private jet company, just your regular private jet charter company.
Okay.
It's been around for 10 years. It was founded by Alex Wilcox, who was one of the JetBlue founding executives. And interestingly, one of the other board members and investors is Tony Hsieh, who is the founder of Zappos.
Zappos, yeah.
And sitting on the board is also David Neeleman, who is the founder of JetBlue and the CEO of Azul and Moxie, or whatever they're going to end up calling it in the end. And also a minority stakeholder is Qatar Airways as of this year. So they have, I think they're one of the biggest, if not the biggest, private jet charter company in the US.
Okay.
So they've done this sensibly, but they've introduced this product called JetSuiteX, which is what I tried. And it's short haul public charter flight. So it's not a private jet. It's a fleet of Embraer 135s. And the inside of the airplane is, reasonably good seat pitch, but there's got to be 30 plus seats on there at least. So it's like an airline. You have assigned seating. There's Wi-Fi. There's free alcohol and snacks and stuff. It's like a JetBlue experience in economy. It was fine. They only operate on the West Coast. I'm skimming over a lot of these details because this isn't what separates it and makes it, to me, one of the best ideas I've experienced in aviation in a long time.
See, guys, Alex has been corrupted.
Yeah, I have been because, so they fly Burbank, Oakland, Vegas, Santa Ana, which is John Wayne Airport, one of the main LA airports, Mammoth Lakes in Yosemite, that's a seasonal one, and Concord, which is in the East Bay, in the East Bay Area, which is where I flew out of. So the in-flight service is great. It's efficient. It took off on time. Friendly people, quiet. Everybody's a business traveler. Here's what makes it so great. They don't operate out of the airport terminals at those places.
Okay.
Concord doesn't even have an airport terminal. They have their own private terminal at the airport, away from, it's completely on the other side of the airport from the main terminal at Burbank, which is where I flew into. You don't go through security. You're supposed to arrive 20 minutes before departure. People were arriving at the departure time, and we still got out on time.
Wow.
At Concord, and in the terminal, there's comfy seats and coffee and snacks. And then you board, you walk out 15 feet to the airplane, you get on board and you go.
That's unbeatable.
It's the price of the ticket was comparable to a within 30-day booking on Southwest.
Do they provide you with a large network if you were to
Not
live
yet.
there? Okay.
Just on the West Coast. So if you were doing the Bay Area to Southern California hop, I don't know why you would fly on anybody else. That airport experience alone makes it work. I mean, the flight is no more than an hour. So
yeah, it's short.
The fact they give you a good cup of coffee and a snack and Wi-Fi, that's all you need. And if you're coming back, they give you a beer or a glass of wine and some peanuts or whatever. At Burbank, their hangar was also roped off as part of the terminal as well. So the plane pulls right up. It's like when it taxis in, you're standing there in the hangar, which is cool in of itself. There's a ping pong table and a foosball table and again, coffee. And there's a room where if you want a little bit of peace and quiet. But seeing the plane taxi right up, everybody gets off, the baggage comes off, you get on and you go. They've got relationships with Uber and Lyft and rental car companies. So you can just... So I just flew to Burbank and back. I just wanted to experience what the offering was. So I flew into Burbank, got off the plane, got an Uber, went to downtown Burbank, had a nice breakfast, came back and flew home to Oakland, where they use Signature Flight Support, which is one of the FBOs there. So again, no faffing at the airport, no faffing with baggage claim. They just take it off the airplane and hand it to you if you've got a checked bag. This is such a flipping great idea.
Do they not have some type of competition on these?
No.
I'm not saying as good or maybe as price is good, because I keep hearing from friends who live either in LA or San Francisco and commute between the two with planes that now they've all opted for, and I forgot the name of this other...
Probably Swissair or something like that.
Swissair, yeah, I think that's the one, yeah. Is it similar?
No, it's not, because you pay per flight with JetSuiteX, and Swissair is the subscription model.
Yeah.
And interestingly, because this was sort of a research trip, I chatted with a lot of people. I mean, that's exactly what it was. I chatted with a lot of people on the ground and in the plane saying, do you do this often? Why do you use this? Have you thought about Surfair? And the people flying out of Concord were like, I live in the East Bay. This is a no-brainer for me. I only got up 45 minutes ago, and here I am about to get on the plane. Those people in the air at Burbank talked about the same situation. They said it's way easier than having to schlep across LA, the greater LA area, to try and get to LAX if I want to fly on somebody good, or I take Southwest out of, who are also good, but perhaps they're not quite the same demographic.
Absolutely.
People said, I fly a lot, but Surfair doesn't fly to the airports I need in the Bay Area or to Southern California. So I thought that was interesting. And they said, if I'm on vacation for 6 weeks, I don't want to drop $2,500 for flights I'm never going to take. So this makes way more sense. I was so impressed by it. And I really hope that they are able to scale this and still keep this experience of the private terminal, of the feeling. I just loved it. I was so impressed.
We said many times that these types exist within Texas as well, exist, I think, on the East Coast between New York and maybe DC. And a lot of it is LA, San Francisco, or Auckland. Or I've yet to see, maybe I'm completely wrong because I do not live in the US, and maybe some of our listeners will actually counter what I'm just about to say. I'm yet to see like a larger scale operation when you could have that type of experience, whether it's JetSuiteX is the name you said, or a Surfair if people rather have a subscription that actually scales to way more destinations. And of course, not even to mention having the same in Europe or
I don't think there are many places where this would work as well as the Bay Area, where you have either airports like Oakland and Burbank, which are big enough to accommodate it, but also have private jet or executive terminals, or somewhere like Concord, which is the same deal, where you've got two massive metropolitan hubs that you're trying to link or are already highly trafficked.
Yeah, they're highly trafficked, and you have people that also are ready to pay. Both are like metropolises that have high income. You're right. The right conditions are met there.
Yeah. And I've been thinking about where else this would work. Would it work in the UK? I don't know. You'd have to go all the way out to Biggin Hill. It could work out of London City, but there's just no physical real estate there.
Yeah. Exactly.
And where would you go? Would you go to Paris? What airport are you going to fly to in Paris?
I think the only attempts were done were basically the banker routes. So Zurich, maybe Geneva, maybe Luxembourg. The routes that they know people are already doing often, and would probably appreciate a different experience. But like you say, the problem is in London, if we're talking about London, that there's no room to have that experience at Lucy. Biggin Hill is fine. There's room, but Biggin Hill is a bit out of the way. If you work in Canary Wharf in the city, is it worth it for you to go to Biggin Hill when you have London City next door? I'm not sure.
Exactly. So, I think they've tapped into a very lucrative market. They've been sensible, and they've built an extremely successful business for the last 10 years on other areas. They clearly know their demographic because they've got those seasonal flights from LA to Mammoth for skiing, and then they do extra capacity for Sundance, for CES.
Yeah, I'm sure.
A few others. Yeah. They've done their homework. I was impressed.
Okay, so JetSuiteX, next time I'm on the West Coast, you have to reach out to me because, of course, you're listening to this podcast, and that's why you invited Alex, because we were just saying, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested if I get the chance to try this. I was always thinking about trying Surfair. I think because if you're subscribed, you can from time to time give a discount to someone else to try, it's like an onboarding technique, like a growth hacking technique to get more. So, but I would definitely try, even if I had to pay, not being invited, if I had to pay, I would definitely want to try just to witness that experience because it's very rare.
Yeah, it's very rare. I was impressed. I can't wait to do it again.
So since you mentioned JetBlue, just one bit before I go back to Australia, JetBlue has been hinting for a long, long time that they were planning to come to Europe. It's basically confirmed because the new chief operating officer, Joanna Gerati, she's actually the highest woman ranking in any US airline, which is great as well. She basically said there's no timeline, but yes, we're coming for Europe, which translates probably into London first. They should be using Airbus 220, so the Bombardier, the ex-Bombardier C series, and 321 LR. They're coming. I really hope they bring that Mint product, because that will be a great addition for us.
Yeah, it will. I'm a huge fan of that product, as you know. So quickly, JetBlue, please.
Please. I'm sure they listen to us. I'm sure Joanna listens to us as well. She has all the time. So I'm in the lounge in Abu Dhabi, as I told you guys. Just one thing. There was this crew that was looking for passengers because the flight was more than a final call. It was, I think, closing. The guests are in front of me, the passenger that's supposed to go to that flight, and she says, you need to run. The guy answers, nobody will run whilst finishing their coffee, and stays there. And I'm like, oh my God, this sense of entitlement. Anyway, so now I'm going to mix both my flights going to Melbourne and coming back from Melbourne to Abu Dhabi, because they were both on the same aircraft, the 789, the Dreamliner-9. Honestly, probably, to me, if not the best, at least top 3 best business product I've ever seen. It's a fantastic product, which makes me even more regret that kind of, Etihad going backwards and being a smaller airline, because that experience I've rarely seen. The seats first are, again, 1-to-1. But because they wanted to give more space for the seats, they do this, like every second one is reverse, which some people don't like. I did both. I did one on a reverse seat, if you want, so looking backwards. These ones have these fake windows, as I call them, as in they're closer to the aisle. So they're actually numbered C. And the one that front are, of course, A, and you are next to the window. Honestly, both cases, absolutely amazing. There's one thing, they have a lamp. If you just Google it up, it's called the Etihad Studio. They have a lamp on the side, which again uses that same motif, that same mosaic type of thing that you see on the tail of Etihad. And that gives like a halo of a yellowish light, so not something bright. And my God, this gives all the character to the seat, because it gives that impression you are, they call it studio, but like in a small living room, if you want. It's really, and that shows, by the way, that touch. I'm not sure these lamps, are the most expensive things ever, because, there's IFEs and other stuff that cost, but it really shows that a little touch like that can change your vision and your experience of a seat. I was remembered when I was seated there that, so many airlines, I mentioned Delta, but it doesn't have to be only American, have a great seat. And when you press then, I want to have some lights, it's the seating light that is super freaking bright.
Yeah.
And you're like, that destroys the entire thing, especially if it's nighttime. I just want this thing changes for me the impression that you have in the seat. Really, really absolutely fantastic. It also has a little nifty things, is that when you are on a full lie flat mode, and you press the button to go back to, let's say, lounge mode, it will start automatically, even if it's completely dark. It will just get on just so slightly to give you a sense of where you are, so you're not completely in the dark. So little touches like that are really, really well thought out. And that's why I say it's, for me, top 3, top 2 best seats. The food was absolutely best. It's the best steak I've ever eaten in a flight, full point.
Wow.
Remember, I said the opposite about
they're not easy to do, are they?
No, and it was not like at the very beginning of the flight. So they had made a lot of effort to maintain it in a very, I don't know how, for later, because it really worked super well. It's a great business class. A few surprising things, usually when we have reverse seating, not for all, but most of the airlines now, they have 3-point seat belts. Mm-hmm. Well, no, this is only which was, it's fine. I'm not gonna, but I was expecting, because, you're back against, you're basically leaning forward, if you want, when you're taking off, that there will be a 3-point seat belt, but there's none. For the rest, the windows, because we always talk about windows when we fly Dreamliners, they were dimmed partially when we were on the ground at Abu Dhabi, so taking off to Melbourne. And I understood why, is because it was so hot. It's the middle of the summer, so it's like 50 degrees Celsius, guys. It feels like, I don't know, it feels like you're melting or something. So they did simply that to maintain, of course, an adequate temperature within the aircraft. But my first assumption is, because Alex, we always talk about that, it's like, oh my God, they blocked them. No, it's not true, because as soon as we're taxiing, they let us do whatever we wanted with the windows.
That
was
good.
smart. That was like, okay, now we know it's hot on the ground, so we don't want people to open them and then do whatever you want. As we said once, it seems that they need some kind of booting up time because at the beginning they're slower than later in the flight.
It definitely feels like that. If anybody knows why that's the case, I'd love to know.
Yeah. No air vents. Again, Boeing doesn't seem to be putting air vents, and I don't like that. But I mean, the temperature was fully adequate. The IFE was great. There's one quirk on the IFE that you can like movie. You have a little, like on a Facebook like. And I looked at movies, and I'm guessing people were liking movies in all the seats, and they were aggregating the number of likes. I don't know what it actually signals and if it's actually useful, but it's interesting that I could do it at all, I think.
Yeah.
And you can share, I didn't try it, you can share videos between seats. I'm not totally sure how that works and what's the purpose of it, but it was offered that I could share something I was seeing to another seat. Maybe if you want to see the same thing as somebody else, I don't know. Interesting that they would actually think about that at all.
Yeah, I always sometimes wonder what goes through the minds of these seat designers. Yeah. I think like Singapore Airlines and their suites is, what were you thinking?
So in case you ever fly this, the seats in the middle are also pretty cool. By the way, there was I don't know because I'm not Australian, there must have been some Aussie celebrity sitting next to me in the first flight because all the crew and people were like mumbling. And I was looking at her, because of the reverse situation. She was at the beginning, she was looking basically at me. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but everyone felt super excited. And I'm like, I wanted to go on Wi-Fi, which is the next thing. I went on Wi-Fi, works great. The only problem with Wi-Fi with Etihad, it doesn't have like a human scale. I think the maximum amount is like 200 megabytes or something, and you pay like $20. And you're like, how is really that going to last? So they have a pretty nifty thing that tells you how much you have remaining. But basically, it forced me to, because 15 hours, I went a little bit, download some emails, then I went and I paused it every time, and then of course that was not enough for 15 hours. I wish that an airline like that would just tell me, okay, here's even $50, but here's $50 and that covers you for the entire flight. Give me like a human scale. This will last you 2 hours. But these megabytes thing, I just don't understand. I know that if any one of our listeners has been flying Etihad, that they actually have increased the price of Wi-Fi, again, maybe because of the financial woes, and it used to be better. But, compare when you have Emirates, it's free in business class. You're like, it's not great.
Yeah.
The seat was amazing, super comfortable. I'm tall and it was appropriate for me. The mattress was especially cool. They come and they put you a mattress, really nice mattress, really nice also duvet. Honestly, all these little touches there makes it a freaking fantastic seat. Of course, it's a very new seat. Everything is like touch controls, and they actually are super reactive. You can even dim and undim your windows with the touch control. You don't have to reach for the window itself.
Wow.
And it works. It's super well synced as well. So it's really, really, really fantastic. I've had a message because I was, of course, talking about this on Instagram from listener Mark Buckley at Don't Be Bold that says, and caveat here, that the business is absolutely one of the best, but their economy isn't great. I've never actually flown economy in Etihad. So caveat here, guys, if you ever fly economy, I keep hearing that out of the three, the Emirates economy still is the best. I've done Qatar economy, I've done Emirates economy, but I've never done Etihad economy. So I arrive in Australia. I'll get to the airport in a few seconds after we have a few more news, but I just wanted to mention Dan and Caedwa, Caedwa. I think his name is Chris Edwards, if I'm not mistaken. And both have been super cool, like give me all these tips, talking about the airports, etc., all throughout, and welcoming me when I was landing in Melbourne. So these are two of our listeners. There's been others who've been really cool with me, so I wanted to give them a shout out. The other bit that I wanted to mention is when I went back to Abu Dhabi, I saw something. The tone of voice, and that's the only thing that I would actually maybe give them a slight criticism. The tone of voice of the crew, of course, is very good. I mean, again, I'm telling you, top 3 business class, but it's just so slightly off. I think Emirates does a great job to be very friendly and knowing, how friendly they can be. And of course, the cafes and others, they have this ability. It seemed to me that them had a little bit sometimes of like, can we allow ourselves to be more friendly? And
Yeah.
I don't know if it's per policy. They need a little bit of more work in their tone of voice to be perfect. But again, it's a slightly, but after having flown, it was my third flight with them. I was like, yeah, you need just to let go so slightly and you'd be actually awesome.
Yeah. There is that tendency to equate formality with luxury.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that necessarily is always the case.
So very briefly, I stayed in Abu Dhabi for not even 15 hours. I went to see the Louvre. Guys, you have to see that. It's absolutely fantastic museum, the Louvre in Abu Dhabi. But that's not the point of the show. The point is to say that I've actually experienced the arrivals for the first time in Abu Dhabi, because the other times I went to Abu Dhabi, actually I drove from Dubai. And the departure, man, you know what? Everything is e-gates. And I don't have to register. Whereas in Dubai, they tell you need to register your passport to go to e-gates, and the thing is never open, so you end up having to queue. There you go, you scan your passport and you're in. You go in the same on the way out, you put your passport and you're out. That's it.
Ugh. How wonderful is that?
Exactly. And that's how it's supposed to be. And the demeanor, that's also something that I will say, the demeanor of the immigration people that are locals, because by law, I'm sure they cannot be foreigners, is absolutely amazing. In Dubai, I find it off and on. Sometimes I'm like, do you really want to work here, or are you forced to do it? There, it was absolutely great. So I loved it. It was super fast as well. I was one of the first out, obviously. I had for once, because, 15 hours, I said, whatever. I had put my luggage in the hold. I arrive at the bell. 30 seconds later, my luggage arrives. I'm like, it's really, really, really efficient. It might be an old terminal, but it's actually very, very efficient. The chauffeur service, now it's basically limited to Abu Dhabi. They don't have it like they used to, like all over the world, like Emirates still does. It's the best I ever had as well. Wow. Better than, you remember we had sometimes also on and off experiences about the chauffeur drive in Dubai. When, drivers are basically begging for
tips and trying to pull some other bits and, sob stories on you. Yeah, it can be quite mixed. Whereas
Etihad, both times, really good. To the point, I think they're not outsourced. They must be actually employees of Etihad, which at Emirates, I'm not sure how that works, actually. And then I had bid. I was going to Paris from Abu Dhabi because I had a meeting for work in Paris. I had bid to get myself in first class. I said, you know what? Everything else is paid by the client. Let's try to put a little bit of money to see if I can actually finally experience the apartment, not the residence, guys, the apartment. The residence is that 3-room thing. Yeah. That's off the charts expensive. And I won. So I was able to go on the 380 in the apartment. First, it allowed me to go to their first class lounge at the terminal. And that is awesome. Probably they have realized that they won't have opened this new terminal, so they actually put some money and they reopened the first class lounge last year, and it's a great lounge in Abu Dhabi. It's really a la carte. You have 2 restaurants. It's not, the big thing that we have at Dubai, super huge, but it's really well done. You have quiet areas, business areas, TV areas. As soon as you're seated, first of all, someone basically walked me through the lounge, and then as soon as I was seated, somebody came and took an order. What do you want to drink, sir? We're like, of course, different kind of champagnes and different kinds of wine. I mean, really, again, I know it's first class, but really, really good. You know what? I don't know if it ever happened to you. The experience of the lounge was so good that, man, I almost missed my flight.
Really?
Yes. I'm having another cup of champagne, and I look at my watch and I say, but isn't my flight in 20 minutes? And I'm like, oh my God. And I start running in the airport, which is cramped. And it was fine. I made the flight. But I was like, how? If I hadn't, I was basically, my mind was asleep because
that's an immersive experience, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. I didn't do the spa because that would have been even more immersive because there's a spa in the lounge. But anyway, I'm in the queue. I'm giving my boarding pass to 2 people in front of me. Get upgraded in first class. And my mind goes like, why did I bid? I could have been maybe upgraded for free. Of course not, because probably they've been frequent flyers, and I'm not with Etihad. The apartment, I was on a reverse seat. The advantage of the reverse Etihad apartment, so the one looking backwards, is that your seat is actually super close to the window. These things, I've sent you pictures, Alex. Remember, these things are maybe 5 3 meters large.
Huge.
Like, yeah, huge. And so you have a bench, and on the other side, you have the actual seat. The bench transforms into a bed whenever you want to sleep. But that means that those seats closer to the aisle have 2 meters to the window. It's really, really far. And once you're taking off or landing, which is where it's very interesting to look outside, you cannot really look outside, no matter the cameras they provide you with. So, man, that experience probably, again, I keep saying that in terms of the food experience that Ed Parsons has finally tried it. I think Emirates first class remains, you say that as well. That seat is awesome, right? But that seat by Etihad is also awesome. The fact that you have a seat and a bed, that these two are separate, is pretty cool. The screen, at first I was like, okay, so the screen is in front of my seat, and when I'll be sleeping, how will I be able to watch anything if I want to? But no, when they do your bed, they actually tilt the screen completely in front of you. So you have this massive screen looking. No, it's
so how does it? Because there's the residence, which is crazy. Then there's the apartment, and then there's the first suite.
No. That's the thing. The apartment is the first suite. That's the name of the first suite, is apartments. So these are the ones with a door. These are only available on the 380 because of the size of the aircraft. The first that you experience on 330s and on 777s is closer to what you have on Emirates. This, because of the size of the aircraft, they allow themselves with these like 3 meters massive things. So it's 1-1, that's it. Mm-hmm. And with the showers, the big bathroom lavatories are on Emirates in the very front. That's where part of that residence is. So it's not fully livable. That's where their bed is. So they have one suite, they have another suite, which is their bed, and they have a third bit, which is their own bathroom.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the suites that you call suite that also, for instance, Singapore would call suites, or Emirates would call suite. They call them apartments because they are slightly bigger with both a bed and a seat. You can order stuff by touchscreen as well if you want. If you don't want to call someone and say, I want that, you can just press a button. Wow. Now, honestly, clearly, one thing what I wanted to do is try the shower, because I said, I've done it on Emirates. I need to compare. So the lavatory is clearly not as big, but the shower feels itself, because you've been to the one in Emirates, Alex, the shower itself feels bigger. The room you have for your feet, maybe because it's square, I don't know, it feels bigger. It's always very cool, stupid, but very cool to do a shower in flight. And for the food, man, you would have loved it. It was also, again, another steak. They said, how do you want your steak? I said, can I have medium rare? Yeah, of course. And
how the hell did they do that?
I don't know, but they did a medium, and it was a fantastic one, man. It was, oh my God. And they also, something that I wish more airlines would do, I know BA does, they ask me whether I want sparkling water or still water, because it's all these airlines just give me I'm a sparkling water guy for some reason.
Yeah, me too.
They give me that glass of still water, and I need to, hey, sorry, can I just switch that for, they told me what I want, and I don't know, it's just, of course it's first class, guys, I know, but is it better than Lufthansa? Probably, yes. Is it better than Emirates? It's on par. There you go.
Wow. That's quite I got to find a way to experience it.
Yeah, especially they have great deals now, probably because of all the financial woes. You can find super cool deals, especially leaving from Arlanda, from Stockholm. You have amazing deals, guys. They're still running. Take a look. Last bit, the one thing that I was a bit underwhelmed with is having seen the super cool amenity kits that I mentioned earlier with the mosaics and the colors and the lux inside. That one was just black. I mean, maybe because I'm someone who likes a bit stuff with colors and a bit more hip, different, and a bit more flash, not flashy, but like lux, like it's irreverent.
Yeah.
That felt way more, maybe because that's how they see first class, way more formal.
Yeah.
I'd rather have had something with lots of colors and a bit more irreverent, because that's what, and I'll finish it with that, that's what I like about Etihad over Emirates, is because they were fast followers. They had, for me, the old color tone is better. They always try to be slightly different from Emirates, and that irreverence is maybe too much of a term because they're still a Middle Eastern carrier, but they were a little bit more hip than Emirates, which was quite formal. I mean, the crew is fun, but the hard product can be very formal. And I think they're losing that a bit by doing these kind of things. But I mean, again, one of the best first class I've ever done, and top 2 business class at Studio. So absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, just looking at the pictures that you sent and the pictures online of both of those cabins, it looks phenomenal. I definitely have to trying to rack my brain to see if there's any trips I have coming up that I can. But I don't think I do. I'm sure I'll find an excuse one day.
As you can feel, we had actually a little bit of a hiccup during this recording, so that shortens slightly our recording time. And also, I have a hard stop because I have a call with a client, so I won't be able to go through the news that I wanted about Qantas and Australia, which were about the longest flights and what they're going to do with them. We're going to cover those in the next episode, if you don't mind, the Project Sunrise, which is, how far and how long will they ever fly from Sydney? That will be absolutely fascinating to talk about. And I think that requires more than 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
You are flying to Japan in November, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Have you seen that story by our good friend, Tokyo Reporter, my good friend Brett, that upon landing at Narita, police had to arrest a 24-year-old American because he urinated on a fellow passenger during a flight from Jesus.
There's something wrong with that person.
He says, "Since I was drunk, I do not recall the incident," and he denies it.
There's someone took a video of it.
I'm like, what the hell? I mean, sometimes, man. So we mentioned, I think, 20 episodes ago, maybe even more. You remember, because it's the age of these massive airports. You have the new Istanbul ones, you have the potential new midfield one at Abu Dhabi that I mentioned, and you remember the one at Mexico, supposed to look like an X, which is a reference, of course, of the X of the name Mexico, done by Norman Foster.
Yeah.
They started building it. The construction started in 2016, maybe, so it's more than 2 years that it's been going on. But the new president just thinks it's too expensive, and although, again, they already put all that money, and it's going to put the fate of the airport on referendum and maybe stop simply doing it. I mean, I get it, but at the same time, they started it.
Yeah, it seems slightly futile to do that.
So they're going to do that in October. I mean, look at the pictures if you don't remember, guys. New Mexico airport. It's absolutely stunning. There was supposed to be like 6 runways and I think 70 or 80 million passengers. Really fantastic. So, I mean, I get it because I'm not in favor of overspending and etc. But when I see these beautiful airports, I want them because we want to simply visit them once they're done. We are really looking forward to them.
Yeah.
And also yesterday, I think the 5th of September marks the 12 years since they did the groundbreaking at Berlin.
It's extraordinary.
And
That's
it's still
completely extraordinary. What a train wreck.
Yeah, exactly. So in Australia, Sydney has just, by the way, and we'll talk about that in a further episode when either Alex or me, I don't know who's going to ever fly there for the first time. We'll talk about it. They've also are doing a major renovation, but Melbourne is a bit of the lesser. I was warned, I think, by Dan on Twitter that Melbourne is the lesser airport, and it feels like it. I believe it's the airport I landed at 25 years ago.
Really?
I didn't go to Sydney because, first of all, I was poor. I was a student back then, 25 years ago. I went to Sydney, but I took the bus, which is a 13 hours ride to actually go from Melbourne to Sydney. There was no low-cost travels back then, man. The airport feels a bit old. It's the international terminal. There's many terminals. Others, obviously, one is Qantas and the others are domestic. But, I mean, it's okay. You land there and the ceiling is a bit like Manchester. It feels sometimes very low, especially for someone tall. You're tall as well. The layout is also very strange. There's a lot of, pre-immigration duty-frees as well.
Okay.
And when you've never done it, and again, 25 years ago, I couldn't remember it, there are machines a bit everywhere and people queuing in front of machines. And I'm like, am I supposed to do something with those machines and press on a button? And then I look and it's only for Australian citizens. I'm like, I keep walking. And then there's another queue, but that's only for 5 passports. The American, British, of course, Australian, New Zealand, and I'm missing one, Canada maybe. A special line, which is fast track, and it allows you to use e-gates. All the others, and I was one of the other, we have to use people, basically. And that was fine. It was 5 a.m. It was a bit long. I did the mistake of going to the fast track one, which I had access to, because the fast track one I didn't realize was also for crew, and the crew were fast track within the fast track. So basically I could see that people that were in a normal line were going faster, and I was in a fast track kept being overtaken, and I get it, by crew. But yeah, I mean, it's okay. And then the one thing that is missing from Melbourne, there's no rail link to go to the city.
Yeah.
And they are saying they're going to open it maybe by 2022. They're spending like, I don't know, billions and billions on it. They're creating new trains as well, because central Melbourne is amazing for trains. You have trams that are free. Man, they're free in the center.
Yeah, that's I love that. I remember discovering that when I was researching the attaché book, and I like had to triple and quadruple check it to make sure that it was in fact the case.
It's fantastic. It's really, because it allows you. I didn't spend anything, and it's a very big network of trams as well. It goes pretty much everywhere. Not the airport, obviously. They also have, I think, a metro. I didn't use it, and so they are planning to upgrade this. But from the airport, there's none. So your best bet is to use, of course, a cab or Uber. And I say Uber because, you know, there's so many cities or countries or airports that are making it hard for Uber to operate. This is the exact opposite. You arrive there and you have these massive signs by 5 meters by 2 telling you, welcome to Melbourne. Here's Uber if you want it. And everything is so well organized. And I'm not favoring Uber over, you know, any other ride sharing app. I'm just saying that this is how it should be.
Yeah, it makes such a difference.
It did. And I used Uber, it was great on both ends. On the way back, so when I was boarding to go back to Abu Dhabi, that's, I think, the most interesting part is that they are clearly refurbishing both security and immigration. They are currently doing it. Security is okay. They have this bit narrow X-ray tray. So basically, you cannot start to remove the stuff before you arrive there, which kind of clogs it up a bit. But the great thing in like Abu Dhabi, I put my passport on the thing, the gate opens, and that was it. So efficient.
So civilized.
And again, was probably because, you know, I had to deal with someone when I entered. Once they have me on the system, they just want to make sure that I've left, and that's it. They don't need to actually talk to me. And that was really fast, really efficient doors, e-gates of absolutely fantastic. Then it's a very strange layout. You keep walking a single corridor. At first, there's, of course, a duty-free, like they all do now. They kind of force you to go through duty-free, a few nice shops. Then you keep walking to a nondescript corridor, and you have the first gates. I'm like, what? It's very strange. It's basically because it's small. So it's a single corridor where you walk, and at some point it becomes a Y, and you have 2 corridors, but it's not really enthralling as an experience, to be honest with you. But the lounges, because they are on the upper floor, and the gates that are near the end, gates 10, 9, 8, I think, these have all the views. So you're sitting there, even if you don't have access to a lounge, and you see on one side landings, because there's 2 runways. The landings are clearly on one runway. On the other side, you can see the takeoffs. You can see all the planes being parked on the apron. That is absolutely cool. And on the upper, where I was, there was the Etihad lounge next to, obviously, the Emirates lounge. And thank God Etihad is actually, for me, the best one, because Etihad has, through the direction they're looking at, we have not only the aprons, but there are all the landings and the second part of the takeoff. So we just see when the plane is taking off, whereas Emirates basically only sees parked planes. So, haha.
Right.
Here you go. One of the best lounges I've been to, again, not huge because they don't require to, but very airy, great foods. There's a bar, again, using that mosaic. You can see that they've been refurbishing or reopening it. I don't know, very recently, because it's really well done. You have someone serving you if you want or not. They leave you alone or not. It's very well done. It's a business. There's no like such a thing as a first lounge. But the best part, again, simply, Alex, you love that too. The views is absolutely great. It's really funny though. I was seeing, because I like taking pictures of plane taking off and I was like, hey, there's a 380 at the very end of the runway. It's about to take off. So I put my camera and I'm like, okay, recording. After 2 minutes, it's not moving. What's going on? Okay, well, maybe a live ATC or something. And I said, God, I cannot find the right channel. 5 minutes, not moving. I'm like, this plane is not moving, actually.
That's weird.
And then I actually learned that because there's a lack of room to park, because the thing is huge, the A380. And if it was to stay at a gate, it would actually take too much space. So they park between runs. They park it at the end of the runway. They have a thing like they have on old runways when you can turn around for the planes. They have that and they just park it there.
That's funny.
So you always can see it's the runway, I think 1634. You can always see this because I think the plane lands at 6 a.m. and leaves at 9 p.m. So in between, they just leave it there. So there you go.
Hey, you got to do what works, right?
Exactly. So absolutely great airport for that. Is it airport for layovers? You are more or less, 25 minutes from the center. I didn't experience traffic. I don't know. Maybe people will tell me there's sometimes more traffic, but Melbourne has so much to offer. It's you, Alex, have to do an episode there just because of the food. I don't think I've ever seen as many food courts in my life as I've seen in Melbourne. I don't think I've ever seen as many coffee places because there's a huge coffee culture as I've seen in Melbourne. It's absolutely fantastic. There's a huge Greek community. So I went for some Greek food, obviously, but also Chinatown. There's also a lot of Asian choices because a lot of Asian communities live there as well. I could relocate to Melbourne tomorrow.
Wow. That's quite a statement.
It's just that it's too far. I know that Australian would tell you guys are too far.
Yeah.
But it's, when you have your community and friends in Europe or in the US, it's really far out. But man, the feeling of the city, usually I'm the guy who prefers the large cities. So I prefer Tokyo over Osaka, or I prefer LA over clearly San Francisco, which is not even a city, or New York will be my favorite city. I always like the big cities, or London over Manchester. I don't know. But there, I remember for 25 years ago, I preferred Melbourne over Sydney. I haven't been back to Sydney, but I land and I'm like, will I feel the same? Or is it just me playing on my memories when I was 17, man. Of course, everything is cool when you're 17. And man, yeah, it kept that way. It's awesome. It's such an awesome city. And Dan told me that actually the difference between Melbourne and Sydney, I didn't know, is only 500,000 people. So it actually is not much of a difference.
Yeah, that's pretty inconsequential in the big scheme of things.
You'd love it. The food, man. The food.
Yeah, we definitely have to do an Australia episode. I think we're going to try and figure out a way to do that.
Well, with the Etihad deal, man.
I got to look at that. I think that's a good idea.
They have really fantastic deals still running. Qatar has some, but look at, if you are in Europe, if you do ex-Europe flights, SkyTeam does, of course, a lot of cool deals these days, but Arlanda, Stockholm seems to have all the great deals these days.
Yeah, of course, we've talked about ITA Matrix has scuppered our ability to find those deals as easily as we could, but oh well.
Yeah, oh well, exactly. So great experience. I was very happy to go back. We'll talk a little bit more about Australia because, like as I said, we had some Australian news we wanted to share, but no time in this episode. I didn't visit the Qantas terminal. Apparently, our friend Johnny, the designer, has mentioned that they've completely upgraded their lounges there. They look great, but honestly, flying Qantas is still very expensive. Yeah. I want to fly them, and I will fly them eventually. But this is not because I didn't want to fly Qantas, because I really wanted to do that Perth thing. It's just that it's very expensive still.
Yeah.
Because you know what? Because now I've learned they have one signature dining concept in each of their lounges. So in Brisbane, it's Mexican, and in Perth, that's a pizza thing.
That's the pizza thing. Right.
I don't know what Melbourne is, guys, because it just opened. So, guys, tell me what Melbourne is. If it's pizza, that's a reason for me to fly Qantas. So you're flying a lot, no?
Yes, yeah, I'm busy several months coming up for the rest of the year, really. It's just going to be nonstop. But you know what? I quietly like that.
Yeah, I know. What are the, let's say, the next 2 to 3 ones? I think you mentioned Vancouver, which is Sunday.
Vancouver, and then Chicago the following weekend. Kristiansand in Norway, which I'm looking forward to. I've never been
Kristiansand in Norway. Wait, where?
Yeah, it's southern Norway, so I'm speaking at a travel conference there, so looking forward to that.
Okay. I've only been to Bergen. Did we cover Bergen? Yeah, we'll cover that one.
Bergen's great as well.
Yeah.
And then Vegas, and then Hong Kong, and Ishigaki, and Japan.
Oh, that's the holidays. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, and Japan. Yeah.
So looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad because I've been doing the brunt of the long-haul flights up to now, and now the next month for me will be Europe. I'm doing, I don't know, Berlin, Amsterdam, Paris multiple times, Madrid, again, my good old Madrid. I'm going back actually also for travel. Work travel related, and so I'm glad that we can pass the torch like this.
Yeah,
I've done a long haul. Now it's your turn for a little bit. You guys, you will hear Alex talk more in the episodes and less about me, which is probably a good thing.
It's a good balance, I think, we strike between who's traveling where.
Yes, and I've one. I'm not going to spell it out. One actually, that I'm very much looking forward. That will be quite a long haul one. That will be another new airport. So lots of new airports to cover. Yeah. I already have an idea which one will be the next one. The only thing is, like, as you've understood, when will we be able to record is completely up in the air. So we're not promising you anything, but I'm sure we'll find a way to record one soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on that, safe travel.
Safe travels, guys.